I didn't expect Christmas dinner to end with me lying on the floor. That's the sentence that kept replaying in my head as I stared up at the ceiling, the chandelier above me spinning like a warped snowflake. One moment I was pulling out my chair at the dinner table, smiling politely, doing what I'd always done, trying to fit into a family that never made room for me. And the next, his hand was on my shoulder, heavy, claiming. I felt the pressure first. His thick fingers digging into the fabric of my sweater, then into my skin. Before I could even process the touch, the shove came. A cold, sharp force that knocked every bit of air out of my lungs. My heel slipped on the polished hardwood, and I went down hard, knees hitting first, then my hip, then my palm scraping against spilled cranberry sauce on the rug. The whole room gasped, but no one moved, not my mom, who brought this man into our lives. Not my stepsister, already sliding smugly into the chair he'd rescued for her. Not the cousins, the aunts, the people who'd known me my whole life. It was Christmas. A time for warmth, apparently, just not for me. My stepdad stood over me, jaw clenched, chest puffed like he thought he was protecting something that belonged to him. "That seat," he said, voice dripping with contempt, "belongs to my real daughter. Get out." Real daughter. The words sliced through me sharper than the fall. I could still feel his shove in my bones, but those words, they hit deeper. Somewhere people couldn't see. The room was frozen like a photograph. Forks paused midair. Eyes darting. Mouths open but silent. Not one person reached out a hand to help me up. My breath shook as I pushed myself up from the floor. The cranberry sauce smeared across my palm looked like blood for a second. Maybe that's why everything tasted like metal, like I had bitten down on something sharp. Or maybe it was just the humiliation burning its way up my throat. Heat flooded my chest, rising like a tide I couldn't stop. Not anger, something heavier. Something that had been building for years. All the comments, the favoritism, the way he treated me like I was renting space in my own life. I stood slowly. I didn't look at him. I didn't look at anyone. I just pulled out the chair across the table and sat down. Quiet. Controlled. But inside, something had snapped. Something permanent. They thought they won a victory by putting me in my place. They thought I would swallow it like I always did, let the moment pass, pretend it didn't hurt. They had no idea what they just started. Because while he smirked at his daughter settling into the seat he stole, I was already planning. Already calculating. Already knowing that this wouldn't end here. Not this time. What he didn't know was that before the night was over, I'd make sure this moment changed his life forever. Families don't shatter in a single night. They don't explode like fireworks. They crack. Slowly, quietly, in ways that look harmless until you trace the fractures back to where they began. And for me, those cracks started the year my mom remarried. I was 13 when he came into our lives. A whirlwind romance that swept my mother off her feet so fast she didn't notice the ground disappearing from under mine. He moved into our house with boxes labeled Emily's Things, before I'd even memorized his middle name. Everything about him was loud. His confidence, his opinions, his expectations. And yet with me, he was silent. Not the peaceful kind of silence. The cutting kind. In the beginning I thought he just needed time. I tried to be polite, to be helpful, to make space for this new version of our family. But he treated me like scenery. Like something he had to step around. No greetings when I came home from school. No good nights. No interest in anything I did. Just a pair of raised eyebrows any time I spoke. As if my voice was an inconvenience. As if I was, and when he did speak to me, it was always the same kind of comment. Small enough to deny, sharp enough to land. Real families eat together. Real daughters call their parents. Real loyalty comes naturally, you know? Every time that word, real, was the knife that I told my mom once, sitting at the edge of her bed with tears I wasn't supposed to shed at my age. She stroked my hair and said the line that became her anthem. "He's trying his best, honey. You're just sensitive." Sensitive. As if feeling unloved was a flaw. Meanwhile, Emily, his daughter, lived under a spotlight so bright it made the rest of us blur. Birthday trips, special outings, inside jokes whispered across dinner tables. She walked into the room and everything stopped for her. I walked into the room and everything continued as if I hadn't arrived. That's when I learned to shrink. Not visibly. Not dramatically. Quietly. Skillfully. I learned how to slip into corners, how to laugh softly, how to breathe smaller. I learned how to exist without taking up space he might want. And holidays. God, holidays were the worst. The house overflowing with relatives who adored him, who adored Emily, who called them the perfect little family. I'd sit on the edge of couches across the room, at the kids' table even when I was 16. Invisible. Present but never included. I stayed for one reason. My mom, that I kept coming back because a part of me believed, desperately, that she would one day look at me and see the daughter she was letting slip through her fingers. I kept hoping she'd notice the way I folded into myself. I kept hoping she'd choose me, even once, but she never did. And the thing about quiet cruelty is this. His silence was sharp enough to shape the girl I became. Sharp enough to make Christmas night feel inevitable. Because you can only be invisible for so many years before something inside you begins to rise. And that rising, slow, controlled, unstoppable, was the beginning of everything that came next. For a moment after I hit the floor, the whole room froze. Not out of concern but out of curiosity. Everyone was waiting to see how much humiliation I would swallow. My palms stung, my shoulder throbbed, and I could still feel the echo of his shove on my skin. But the worst part was the quiet. Heavy. Expectant. A silence that said, "Are you going to make this uncomfortable for us, or are you going to stay in your place?" My mom finally made a sound. A soft, embarrassed gasp, the kind people make when a waiter drops a plate in a restaurant. Not fear. Not outrage. Just inconvenience. She rushed toward me, not to help me up, but to dab at the cranberry stain on my sleeve with a napkin. "Ava, sweetie, just sit somewhere else," she whispered, eyes darting around as if protecting the illusion of peace mattered more than the fact her daughter had just been shoved to the ground, somewhere else. Like I was furniture being rearranged to prevent an argument across the table, Emily stared at her plate with exaggerated focus, pretending to adjust her bracelet. That gold one her dad gave her last Christmas, the one he said, "Only a real daughter deserves." She didn't speak. She didn't look at me. She didn't need to. Her silence was permission. My stepdad leaned back in his chair like a king satisfied with his decree. "I said what I said," he muttered, loud enough for the whole room. "My real daughter." The word real burned more than the fall. It seared through the air, through the table, through the flimsy barrier I'd built over the years to protect myself. My chest tightened, not from the impact, but from the truth settling in. I could fall to the floor in front of them, and they would still find a way to blame me for ruining the night. My mom gave a shaky laugh, the kind that begged everyone to just pretend. "Let's not ruin Christmas," she said, smoothing her sweater like that would smooth over the moment. They pointed me toward the chair by the window, the one far from the table, far from the warmth, far from family. The extra seat. The seat for guests. Or worse, outsiders. And for the first time in my life I saw the whole picture clearly. Staying quiet wasn't keeping the peace. It was keeping me small. That was the moment I felt the break. A clean snap inside me. Ava didn't slam the door when she left. She didn't shout. She didn't look back. She simply walked out of the house where she'd always been an afterthought and stepped into the icy Christmas night with one truth echoing in her mind. Enough. The cold hit her first, sharp and cleansing. Christmas lights lined every house on the street, glowing red and gold, but they blurred into streaks of color as she got into her car. Her hands were clenched so tightly around the steering wheel that her knuckles were white, but her mind, unlike her body, was calm. Silent. Focused as she drove, her phone buzzed non-stop on the passenger seat. "Mom." "Emily." Again. Unknown number. "Mom." She didn't answer a single call. Not because she didn't want to hear their excuses, but because she already knew them. "Ava, sweetie, you overreacted." He didn't mean it. Let's not ruin Christmas. Each buzz of the phone only solidified her resolve. By the time she pulled into her driveway, her jaw was tight with determination. Inside her house, the quiet felt different than usual. Not lonely. Not empty. Just hers. She hung up her coat, walked into the dim kitchen, and set water to boil. The soft, steady hum of the kettle filled the room, and for the first time all night, she exhaled fully. As steam curled into the air, something inside her settled. This wasn't rage. This was clarity. Tea in hand, she walked to the dining table, opened her laptop, and began pulling up the documents she hadn't looked at in months. Years maybe. She'd always been the organized one, the one her mom relied on to help keep track of adult things. Insurance papers, maintenance invoices, utility accounts, renewal notices. Back then it felt like responsibility. Now she realized it had been something else entirely. She opened a folder labeled House Docs, one she'd created for her mom during tax season last year. Line after line appeared on the screen. Heating repair. Billed to mom. New water heater, under mom's name. Roof patching balance overdue. Credit card late fee mom's account. Garage door replacement, mom. The list kept scrolling. Ava paused, staring at the screen as the pattern clicked into place. He took the praise. He took the authority. He took the seat at the head of the table. But every responsibility, every cost, every burden fell on her mother's shoulders, her mother, who apologized for him, who defended him, who told Ava she was too sensitive. Ava closed her eyes, letting the truth settle like a weight she should have noticed sooner. This wasn't about destroying him. She didn't need chaos or revenge for revenge's sake. She wanted accountability. She wanted the truth exposed. She wanted her mother to finally see the difference between loyalty and manipulation. By midnight, Ava had outlined everything. Financial inconsistencies, responsibilities shifted onto her mom, repairs ignored until they became crises. Receipts. Proof. All she needed now was to hold up a mirror. To show him and everyone else what he'd been stepping over for years. She closed her laptop with a soft click. Tomorrow morning, his world would tilt, and he wouldn't see it coming. Because by the time the clock hit midnight, I knew exactly what I needed to do. Morning didn't arrive softly. It arrived vibrating. The first call came at 6:12 a.m. just as Ava poured cereal into a bowl, the sound of the crunching flakes far calmer than the buzzing phone on the counter. Stepdad's name flashed across the screen in bold letters. She didn't touch it. She sat at the table, lifted a spoonful of cereal, and ate while the phone buzzed again. And again. By the time she rinsed her bowl and set it gently in the sink, the call count had climbed to 9. Panic on his end. Clarity on hers. She grabbed her bag, the neatly compiled folder inside, and headed out into the cold morning air. Frost clung to the edges of her windshield, glittering in the weak sunlight. As she brushed it away, her phone buzzed again. 17 calls now. She didn't check the voicemail. The drive to the attorney's office took her through the north end of town, past old brick buildings and sleepy shops opening their doors for the day. Her phone, face down in the cup holder, lit up every few miles. She didn't flip it over. Not once. When she stepped inside the attorney's office, a converted historic house with warm wooden floors and the faint smell of old paper, she felt a strange sense of stillness settle inside her. He entered the room a moment later, man in his 60s with kind eyes and a voice like gravel softened with time. The sort of person who'd seen far too much of life's messes but still somehow believed in people. "Miss Hartman," he said gently. She nodded and placed the folder on the desk. Her hands didn't shake. He opened it. Took one look, then two, then three. He flipped slowly, pausing at invoices, repair notes, credit statements. Finally, he leaned back and exhaled through his nose. "This is a lot." Ava folded her hands in her lap. "I know. What exactly do you want from this?" he asked. Not unkindly, her answer came without hesitation. "I want her to know the truth. I want my mother to understand what she's been protecting at my expense. Not revenge. Not punishment. Just truth." He nodded thoughtfully. "There's nothing illegal here. No fraud, no criminal acts. But what he's done." He tapped a finger on one of the invoices. "It's manipulation. Deep, calculated, and long-term." Ava swallowed. She'd known that, but hearing it from someone else made it real. We can schedule a meeting, he continued. You, your mother, and your stepfather. This afternoon if you want. Her heart didn't race. It didn't even flutter. Let's do it. As she left his office, her phone buzzed again. She glanced down. 26 missed calls and one voicemail. From her mother. She hesitated for a moment, then pressed play. Ava, honey, he's upset. He said you're trying to cause trouble. I just think we should all calm down. A familiar script. A familiar plea. Ava deleted the voicemail. Not out of anger. Out of exhaustion. She was done carrying the weight of other people's comfort. She made her way to a quiet cafe down the street. Ordered tea. Sat by the window. Her reflection stared back at her, but it wasn't the girl who stayed small to avoid being hurt. It was someone steady. Someone preparing. When her phone buzzed again, she finally checked the screen. 33 missed calls. The rising number didn't scare her. It told her everything she needed to know. He felt the shift before she even said a word. For the first time in my life, I wasn't bracing for the next wound. I was preparing for truth. Ava checked the clock on the attorney's wall. 1:59 p.m. 2 o'clock. The door opened. Her mother stepped inside looking smaller than usual. Hair hastily pinned back, makeup smudged, eyes rimmed red like she hadn't slept or had cried on the way over. She clutched her purse to her chest as if bracing for impact. Ava, she whispered, cautiously approaching. Why are we here? What's going on? Ava didn't answer. She simply nodded toward the conference table. The attorney greeted her mother gently, then began laying out the documents, one by one, across the polished wood surface. Printed emails, invoices, credit card statements, repair orders. All arranged in neat lines like a timeline of truths she'd never looked at. Her mother stared. At first confused, then bewildered. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the first paper. Then the next. Why did he put this in my name? She murmured, voice thin as tissue paper. The attorney's tone remained soft. Because you were the one legally responsible. Not him. You've been carrying the financial weight of the household for years. But he told me he handled everything, she whispered, hand flying to her mouth. That's not reflected in any of these records. Her mother blinked rapidly, swallowing hard, like she was trying to make the document say something different. Then her phone lit up on the table. 37 missed calls. Stepdad, the color drained from her face. She didn't reach for the phone. She didn't even flinch toward it. Just stared at it like it was suddenly foreign. And that was when Ava saw it. The first crack in the story her mother had been living in. Her mother exhaled shakily. I didn't think it was that serious, she whispered, eyes still glued to the evidence spreading across the table. Ava's voice was steady. He shoved me to the floor, Mom. And you told me not to make a scene. Her mother winced as if the words themselves were blows. He gets angry when I confront him. Ava leaned in, not unkind but unwavering. Calm for who? Silence. Her mother's eyes filled, the truth settling in her chest like a weight she didn't know she'd been carrying. Her phone buzzed again. 41 missed calls. This time, she reached for it. Not to answer, but to flip it over and press the side button, silencing it completely. She didn't say a word. But that gesture. That was a shift she'd never made before. Her mother finally looked up at her, eyes glassy. I never wanted you to feel unwanted, she choked out. Ava swallowed the ache in her throat. I know. But wanting and doing aren't the same. The attorney closed the folder gently. Whatever happens next is up to you, he said softly to her mother. But it has to be based on full knowledge, not the story he tells you. Her mother nodded, tears spilling silently, and somewhere between the papers on the table and the phone she refused to answer, the truth finally began to land. She looked smaller but steadier, like someone who'd finally stepped out of a long, cold shadow. After the confrontation, Ava's mom didn't go back home. She packed a single overnight bag, more out of habit than planning, and drove to her sister's house. What was supposed to be just a night to breathe stretched quietly into several days. No shouting, no slamming doors, no tension humming in the walls. Just time, faith, safety. Her stepdad called it first. 6 missed calls that first night, for the next morning to the day after that. Each voicemail sounded less like concern and more like demand disguised as worry. And then, suddenly, the calls stopped altogether. The silence said more than his words ever had. He wasn't looking for understanding. He was looking for control. And without her there, he had nothing to grip. A week later, Ava's mom texted her. Coffee. She arrived at the small cafe looking different. Not broken, but deflated in a way that felt honest. Smaller but steadier, like someone learning how to stand without leaning on the wrong person. I read everything again, she said quietly, hands wrapped around her cup. All the messages. All the moments you tried to tell me. I can't believe how blind I was. Ava shook her head. You weren't blind. You were tired. And he counted on that. Her mom's breath trembled. Not with fear this time, but with recognition. I want things to be different, she said. I don't know how yet. But I'm not going back. And I'm not pretending anymore. It wasn't a perfect apology. But it was an honest one. And Ava felt a strange lightness she hadn't expected. Not victory but relief. The relief of watching her mom finally choose herself. Because protecting yourself isn't disloyal. It's necessary. Families don't heal when everyone stays quiet. They heal when someone finally breaks the pattern. And for Ava, it all began with one simple truth. The truth she laid on a table where, for years, she'd never been allowed to sit. If this story reminds you of something you've lived through, share it in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family? Or choose yourself when it felt impossible? Tell us what changed for you.